welcome. As you can see, I just ran in myself. So I hope you're enjoying your day. I was up at 5:90 earlier today talking to a Chinese bank. That was an interesting experience.
That's great.
Yeah, what we're going to try to do today is spend a little bit of time with you back and forth with Jody. And she's going to ask me a bunch of questions, which I will try to answer based on
Sure.
our collective experience with many of our clients, and especially around a fairly complex topic, right? Because for us, cloud is really about enterprises. It's really about enterprise transformation. It's really about trying to reach out to new digital sources and trying to understand the role of cloud in that particular context is something that we'll try and elicit a little bit today in the next half hour or so. So, Jody, you ready?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining.
Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So I'm Jyoti Chawla, and I'm a senior cloud advisor. I work a lot with clients, right from the chief decision makers to IT influencers. I think I'm fine. I have a mic.
Oh, you have it. Yeah.
Thank you.
They gave me this random mic.
So, Danny, one of the things I'm noticing is that our clients and the business leaders are really facing this challenge around they're seeing their competition, and today's competitors are almost invisible until they start to become disruptive. I'll give you a case in point. I'm working with a large retail client, and they're facing immense pressure, both from online retailers as well as mass marketeers that are launching into luxury segments. So amidst all of these pressures, they are looking to reinvent themselves and be more connected to their customer base. So I'm sure you see this all as well in your customer settings. Can you please share with us your views on this trend?
Sure. Actually, I think it's probably something that every one of our clients is seeing in one form or another. Mm-hmm. That fear or that competitor that could come out of nowhere. I'll give you one classic example. Mm-hmm. Okay, IBM. One of the things that people don't necessarily understand is that we as a business were digitally disrupted. We were disrupted in a fairly dramatic way. So it's something that not only do we try and represent for our clients, but we also see through the lens of the transformation of our own business, right? Mm-hmm. And we have many of the same challenges. If you take a look at what we have lots of our existing business processes and data that our CIO deals with on a regular basis, right? Which is the same thing that I deal with, no matter what industry I'm dealing with or what established enterprise I'm talking to. And they're all trying to figure out exactly how they make an impact and not get disrupted in that particular digital transformation while not losing the assets that they already have, or at least transforming those particular assets in a fairly systematic way, right? And understanding where they need to actually put their energy so that they can make their own transformation and grab whatever market share or whatever opportunity they feel is in front of them through this emerging digital opportunity, right? And we call it disruption, but basically at the end of the day, it's really extended opportunity if you can actually take advantage of it. And so every single one of the clients that I talk to, frankly, including us, is facing that kind of transformational challenge. Mm-hmm. That's so true. If we want to get more specific, let's get more specific.
Yeah, and I think, we want to look at it from both perspectives, the business and the technical. And so when I talk to, technical architects, IT architects, and developers, there's a view that, we have amassed this immense amount of technology debt compared to our nimble startup competitors, right? And they're really struggling with challenges like, I can't rewrite my applications for the cloud. I cannot take all my data from my systems within my firewall to the cloud. And so, how do I reinvent?
Right.
So, what kind of challenges do you see on the technology front?
Yeah, one of the funny things was when I was talking to this client earlier this morning, was one of the questions they asked me was, what do we do with our AS400 applications that currently run our, essentially our payment systems? This was a bank. How do we start to transform those particular assets? Because basically on the one hand, they were building out their own private cloud, and they were literally doing pretty much everything that you see in a classic way. They were building out a PaaS layer, an IaaS layer. They were building out, literally doing this by themselves. The interesting question that they had was, okay, so we're doing this, in more of a cloud native way, and we've got all of these existing assets. What are you doing to help us to actually make that particular transition? And one of the things that I think a lot of us struggle with is understanding what the impact is from a business perspective, okay? Because it always starts with a business outcome. It's not just about technology, it's about trying to drive technology through business outcomes. So, I tried to give them a couple of examples of, people transforming payment systems based on mobile, on mobile devices. I tried to give them examples of, insurance companies that need to reach out to new classes of clients and the like, and using those types of opportunities to then rethink exactly what's happening with your existing systems, right? And then leveraging some of the newer technologies that people are starting to get familiar with, whether it's RESTful interfaces, APIs, so on and so forth, to then start rethinking exactly how they need to start surfacing some of the core systems that they have, where they can't touch anything, but then rethinking it in the context of a brand new programming model interaction layer that may, essentially be driven by brand new data sources, whether it's social, whether it's IoT, whatever. In one form or another, essentially, you're trying to take, all of that information, cull it, and try and make it useful to your client relationships.
Right.
So stop thinking about what it is that you're actually going to cloud enable in a bottom-up way and start thinking about what kinds of opportunities you want to open up,
right,
and rethink exactly what those systems are going to have to do in that particular context. Drive it from there instead of trying to think about, a strict bottom-up transformation that may or may not have any particular business value to, the overall business that you're trying to drive. And if you start thinking about it that way, then it starts to organize some of the pain points that you're going to have to go through, because we all have to go through that kind of transformation.
right,
And you start to focus in or hone in on those pieces that you actually want to transform, instead of just doing random bottom-up stuff,
right,
with technology that may or may not be relevant to that particular business outcome.
right,
Classic examples, we worked with retailers, we've worked with insurance companies, with retailers, it's the 3-second experience. I walk into a store, and basically I want to understand, whether or not I have a history with that particular client. I want to understand whether or not, I want to make a particular offer at point of sale, or I want to make a particular offer when they walk into a store. That's got to be like a 3 to 5 second decision. Okay? Now, the standard systems that people have built, even web-centric standard systems, are not oriented towards 3 to 5 second decisions based on context. Okay? One of the beauties of a lot of these internet-centric, devices, whether it's a mobile device that you're carrying or sensors or whatever, is that they give you context.
right,
They give you location, they give you temporal information, they give you, essentially motion. They can do lots of things that they also give you history,
right,
identity. And when you have that kind of contextual information, you can start to, instead of 15 minutes will give you 15%,
right,
where you sit down and essentially have to answer a whole bunch of questions in a browser, you can literally pick up that particular context during an Uber transaction where you know exactly where that person's going, you know their history, you know exactly where they're originating, who the driver is, and you can actually cull all of that information and essentially give them an offer of an insurance for that particular ride, a micro-insurance transaction, right? But rewriting those particular systems or resurfacing and refactoring those systems with the right set of APIs and the right interaction model is driven by business growth and evolution of business opportunity. Same thing with payment systems, same thing with almost any existing business process. You got to think of it from that particular perspective, then start to transform the business processes, the data, the way you manage data, so on and so forth, based on the opportunity presented to you.
Sure. No, these are really key insights. So based on these challenges that we're seeing, both business and technical, how are they shaping IBM's cloud, next-gen cloud, and future vision? Yeah.
So one of the things that we started realizing very early on was we could not bring forward a solution that did not have flexibility in where you could actually run that particular solution. Okay? So that's one of the fundamental reasons why we based our cloud on open technologies and open standards, with open governance, by the way. Because open source is not necessarily open governance. So one of the things that we tried to do, like for example, our choice of OpenStack, one of the reasons why we wanted to do that was so that we could abstract from an application exactly the APIs that were necessary in order to be able to invoke and understand compute, networking, and storage, independently of the actual implementation of compute, networking, and storage. Why? Because that gives me the ability to then take a multi-tier application, some of which has to run on-premise, some of which can run in a public cloud, some of which needs to be dedicated and isolated in somebody else's premise, and allows me to then split that particular application without having to rewrite, or gives me the flexibility to actually then go off and run some of that application on-premise, some of it off-premise, and I can change as I go along, right? Now, nobody believes in magic,
right?
Okay? So it's not a matter of necessarily making it completely painless, but at least it's much more flexible that way and much more interoperable that way. And when you do that at the IaaS layer, at the PaaS layer, and when you do it through APIs and an API economy, trying to establish standards around APIs, you can actually start to build it up from, I just want to connect to this particular service, all the way down to I want to optimize this particular service for running in a couple of different places because I want to move compute to data or I want to move data to compute, okay? But I need that degree of flexibility because I'm a real enterprise, right? I'm not necessarily, just starting from scratch.
Right.
Okay?
Very true.
I have data warehouses that sit, which I'm not going to move, and I may have business processes that I need to change and evolve, but I need some degree of flexibility in order to be able to do that. And the only way that we saw of doing that was essentially building out these stratification layers based on open APIs.
Okay, that's fantastic. So, in my case, the client that I was working with, a retail client, I really liked the quote that John mentioned right before this. Cloud is really not about the technology adoption, it's really about the customer. And in this case, we saw that this client had a digital presence in terms of Twitter and Facebook, but they really used that channel, so to speak, to push out, information about marketing events and launch events and product launches. And so, what we proposed to them was digital consumerization applications. So, for example, if I have really frizzy hair and I happen to be at this relay event in New York City where I'm faced with November rain, I can take out this app from my favorite brand, and it does what all good apps do, tells me where I am, location sensing, and tells me where my closest stores are. But really, that's not the wow factor for me. The wow factor kicks in when this application is powered by Watson services, where I can use speech-to-text conversion, natural language processing, and actually converse my needs with this digital consultant. And speaking about where data resides, taking a very small set of data from the systems of records around their localized inventory and exposing that within the mobile application, so that, hey, if the right product is not available, what would your sales consultant do? They would probably offer the next best product along those lines. And really the ability to transcend this knowledge that's in their sales workforce into the digital world is a key enabler.
Yeah, and I think in a retail situation like that, there are a lot of issues that we kind of come up against, like for example in healthcare or in any form of financial services. There's all kinds of governance issues around that particular data, right? So in retail, sometimes it's a little bit easier. Like for example, somebody wants to pull weather information and stick it into that particular application and then try and do some analysis as to, what your history has been in terms of buying things. Generally, you can kind of opt into that. But somebody starts fooling around with my information, that essentially looks at my history, I don't know, in savings or in, investment or something like that, I'd start to get queasy.
Right, rightfully so.
Right, so basically, one of the things that I think we're trying to do is both give the flexibility for people to actually start to opt in and think about those types of things. On the other hand, we're trying to provide capabilities, whether it's policy, whether it's security within our own data centers or within the client's data centers, security policies that essentially start to stretch across. If you remember, what I said was we're trying to give the ability for people to build those multi-tier applications. But those multi-tier applications also need some degree of consistency around a life cycle.
Right.
Okay? And I have to have some degree of consistency in everything from core instrumentation all the way up through things like security policy, governance, and governance management. And trying to be able to build that degree of flexibility and also provide that kind of consistency, both off-premise and on-premise, non-trivial exercise.
I can imagine.
Okay? And in some cases, basically, not only do we have to provide standards, but we also have to provide, information flow, logical information flow across multiple different types of systems that can then inherit policy, translate policy, and implement policy.
Right.
So that, you're giving people not only flexibility, but you're also giving them some degree of control.
Yep.
Okay? So, retail, maybe one end of the extreme.
Right.
But a lot of the clients that I talk to are also very concerned about exactly how they manage their end of that particular, set of policies, audits, governance. What kind of data can I leave my firewalls versus others? So we spend a lot of time talking about those types of issues, and by industry and HIPAA. Right?
Sure.
I don't want to end up in
HIPAA, PCI,
right?
GXP.
Yeah, orange jumpsuits. Okay.
Right.
Those are serious issues.
Right. That's great. So, Danny, as you leave here, are there any key takeaways that you'd like to leave our audience with in this journey of business transformation?
Yeah, basically, one of the reasons why, so if you kind of stretch and push on this whole notion of, on the one hand, trying to provide abstraction layers, on the other hand, trying to provide an understanding of end-to-end management, if you will, instrumentation, consistency, it starts to inform why we do things like, for example, in Bluemix, why we went from a public service to a private service that then tries to also understand exactly how you manage that particular set of private services.
Right.
Right? So that, in essence, basically, we're trying to help clients to understand how to manage that end-to-end life cycle so that essentially they don't have to make it up on their own and then break all kinds of, consistency and policy, at least at the level of the underlying infrastructure.
Right.
Right? So whether it's a PaaS, whether it's an IaaS, that kind of, if you'll pardon the expression, that kind of consistency and tethering, or whatever you want to call it, relay, I guess is the marketing term that we use. But basically, that kind of thing allows us to then add speed, lower cost, on both sides, by the way, because it allows us to lower support costs as well as, essentially lowering support costs for you.
Right.
So that's something that I think is not necessarily obvious when you start looking at this whole cloud journey. It's not about trying to control your data center.
Right.
It's really trying to basically implement consistency in that life cycle across, all aspects of the deployment models that we're trying to actually build. Gives you speed and lower support costs.
Excellent.
Both of which I think are extremely important in trying to compete in today's world.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for those key insights, Danny. And on behalf of the audience, I'd really like to thank you for coming in and joining us here.
Thank you. How's it going with your client, by the way?
Oh, it's fantastic. So, this particular application that, I just mentioned, the mobile application, they're right now struggling with coming up with a name for it, just like, we said. And we're also proposing another key theme with them, which is around social listening. So, like I said, they've had this presence around, Twitter and Facebook. However, they have been one-way communication, so really listening from the consumers. And so what we did is we established an analytics platform in the IBM cloud. And there's a lot of data when you look at Twitter, for example. There's tweets and retweets. So there's a lot of
yeah,
noise.
I've looked at Twitter feeds.
Exactly. So there's a lot of noise within the data, and to analyze it and gain insights from it, to
non-trivial.
So doing that on the cloud made complete sense for the IT architects, because this was not their data. This was not their differentiating part of their business. And this was made available on the IBM cloud. And essentially, what we also did is we fed that data, the insights coming out of that, back into their transactional systems, so that they were able to connect the social influencers and within their organization and their ecosystem with the social influencers and their consumers.
Yeah, but so to turn this question back to you, did they start to change their existing systems?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
They didn't. They augmented it. They enriched it with the data to identify the...
So they didn't even establish APIs to be able to front-end those particular systems so that they could actually, start to create that intermediate tier that then starts to change business logic?
Not in this case, but in the case of the digital consultant, they did use APIs, and expose their own assets as APIs,
Good. Very good.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we can answer more in-depth questions about some of the points that we've tried to make here this afternoon.
Great.
So enjoy.
Thank you very much.